Hi YouTube, it is Mama Dough Dawn, and today I am prepping for Thanksgiving. So if you hear some bouncing or growling or screaming or rattling, you know exactly where it's coming from. Can you say hello, Charlotte? Say, I don't know how to talk yet, Mom, but I can bounce. And I take 2 days to prep most of my Thanksgiving meals, get everything ready to go, and then the day of Thanksgiving I just do really small things, and the only thing that I'm actually making from scratch on Thanksgiving is the mashed potatoes. So today I'm getting started on the casseroles and a few little things that just need done, and then 2 days before Thanksgiving I will make all of like the cold pasta salad and deviled eggs and everything like that. So the first thing I need to do is get my turkey out of the freezer and set it in the sink to begin defrosting. Now I'll just leave that in the sink until it's feeling fairly soft on the outside. The inside's probably still going to be a little frozen at that point, but then I will just move it into the fridge to continue defrosting in there. Moving to the dining room here, I have taken a second to pull out most of the bread in my bag. And everything that I'm making, I make from scratch and I just kind of eyeball it. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to give you exact measurements, but almost all the casseroles and things that I make are so forgiving that you can absolutely just kind of eyeball them. They're still going to turn out so good. So I have a bunch of bread laying out and I'm going to let that stale and harden overnight. And this is going to be for my stuffing. So I just leave the bread out in open air. It's not going to mold or anything when it's spaced out like that. Instead, it's going to dry out, and that's what I want it to do for my stuffing. Now, aside from that, there are 5 different things that I'm going to be prepping today. The first is part of my green bean casserole. I will be mixing these ingredients together with some milk and salt and pepper. And then I will also be mixing a bunch of seasonings together to use on my turkey, and then mixing those same seasonings for my gravy and for my stuffing. So all of the flavors kind of mesh together. And this seasoning mix will work for all of them. And then I'm also going to be making my macaroni and cheese, and I'm going to be cooking up a large portion of this bacon for a pasta salad type thing that I'm making. So to make my green bean casserole, I'm just going to take a square casserole dish and put in 2 cans of green beans, a can of cream of mushroom soup, some salt and pepper over here, and then a little bit of milk, basically just to make the cream of mushroom soup a little more liquidy because it is going to be cooked down in the oven. And then I will cover that and put it in the freezer. And then the day of Thanksgiving, I'm going to put the French fried onions on top. I don't want to put them on top before I put it in the freezer because then they'll get all soggy. So I'll wait till the day of Thanksgiving, sprinkle those on top, pop it in the oven until it's bubbling up and the French fried onions begin to turn brown. Alright, so our green bean casserole is complete and put in the freezer. I'll pull that out of the freezer a day before Thanksgiving and just let it defrost before I put it in the oven on Thanksgiving Day. But as you can see, that's super easy, and really that's one you can just eyeball and it's going to turn out so good. Now we're just going to make the seasoning mix that I make for, it goes in my stuffing, the outside of my turkey, and my gravy. First we have salt. I use Himalayan pink salt. You can literally use any kind of salt you want, and I pretty much just put a ton of salt in the dish. Now I take pepper, and I'll put about the same amount of pepper that I put in of salt. Next up I do onion powder, and I'll actually put more onion powder in than there is salt and pepper in there. After I get the onion powder in, I will put in some parsley, and about the same amount of parsley as I put in onion powder. Next up is sage, and again about the same amount of sage as the onion powder and parsley. And lastly, I use garlic with, again, about the same amount as the last ingredients I've mentioned. but then I'm gonna just mix it all up. And then this is gonna be used, like I said, on the outside of my turkey, in my gravy, and in my stuffing. So you guys will see me prep these things later on, but essentially what I'm gonna do is take all that bread that is sitting out, getting hard on my table, and I'm gonna crumple that up until it's in somewhat small pieces, and then I'll add in some of these seasonings, and that is going to be stuffed inside of my bird to make stuffing. But I will also make a dish of stuffing by taking chicken broth and mixing it in with that bready mix until it's kind of gooey, and then putting it in the oven that way. Then I'll just rub this on the outside of my bird. As the bird is baking, I have like a turkey pan, and in the bottom of that pan all the grease is going to be collected. So then I will use that grease to make my gravy. And I'm going to make the gravy by taking some milk and some flour and mixing it together, then adding in what's remaining of my seasonings to this mixture and adding that in to the drippings from the turkey. And then I will cook that on the stove top, and that will be the very last thing I make on Thanksgiving Day, and that will be where my gravy comes from. Alright, so now I'm going to start my homemade macaroni and cheese, and what I got right now is some water boiling on the stove top that I'm going to use to cook my Mastaccioli noodles. And then while those noodles are cooking, I will be working on like the cheesy mixture that goes in the macaroni and cheese. So first, we gotta wait for the water to boil so we can get the noodles in. I'm going to be making a large casserole dish of macaroni and cheese because I love it. It's one of my favorite things, but my guests also really enjoy it too. So the water is boiling, and I'm just going to dump in a bunch of the noodles. I'll probably leave about like 1/4. No, dump the whole box in. That's how I cook. No recipe, just decide as I'm going how much I'm gonna make. So while the noodles are cooking, I'm going to take half a stick of my butter and start melting it in a pan. Once the butter is completely melted and then bubbling like that, I'm gonna shut the heat off and then add in just like literally a small handful of flour. Then mix up the flour until it's somewhat thick. And actually I want it even a little thicker than that, so I'm going to take another little handful here. We should do a cooking show where it's just like handfuls, not cups, just little handfuls, splashes and tidbits. Okay, so that's getting there. This is a roux. So what roux do is thicken milk. That's the purpose of them. So now we want to add in some milk. So now I'm just going to eyeball some milk into here. So I used like about that much of the container. I'll actually use more than that because we're making a big thing of macaroni and cheese. So about 1/3 of a skim milk container. Then I'm going to turn the heat on this one. Stir this mixture around for a second. And I'm going to wait until it boils. Okay, so now this is boiling and steaming. So now we are going to add in our cheddar cheese. And I basically just poured in about the same amount of cheddar cheese as I poured milk in. And now I'm just stirring it. Once it's all stirred in, I'll remove it from the heat and set it aside for a second while the noodles finish cooking. So the noodles are fully cooked. I've drained them and poured them into the casserole dish. And now I'm just going to take my cheese mixture and pour it onto the noodles. And then I will mix it all up. Okay, so the noodles are all mixed, and it probably seems a little soupy, and that's okay because you're going to be baking it in the oven. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some more of the shredded cheddar and just sprinkle it on top. Then, once the cheddar is sprinkled on top, I'm going to take some paprika and just sprinkle that on top as well. Voila. And once this has cooled off, I will cover it and put it in the freezer as well. Also pull it out a day before Thanksgiving to let it defrost, and then pop it in the oven the day of Thanksgiving. So the last thing I have to do is cook up my bacon, and I'll cook up like pretty much everything but 5 or 6 slices. And that is going to be used in a pasta salad that I will be making a couple days from now. So this is my way ahead hot casserole prep for Thanksgiving. Got the turkey out, got the bread beginning to stale for the stuffing, got my seasoning mix all mixed up, and then have a couple of my hot casseroles made and ready to be put in the oven. So if you would like to see more of what I've done with my grocery haul, which I posted 2 days ago, and 2 or 3 days from now, I'm going to be making, or in 2 days from now, on Tuesday, I'm going to be making all of my cold casseroles and finishing up the last few little things I need to do before Thanksgiving. And then of course on Thanksgiving Day, I will also be doing a couple things. So you can tune in both of those days to see how Thanksgiving comes together.